The school bus accident should have been a tragedy that made headlines across the country. But Carol Washington's Army combat training kicked in, and she managed to save 35 children using skills she'd learned protecting convoys in the world's most dangerous war zone. Route 47 started at 6:45 a.m. sharp, and Carol Washington had been driving it for 8 years without missing a single day. The yellow school bus, number 847, was her responsibility, and she treated it like the convoy vehicle she once commanded in Iraq, meticulously maintained, safety-checked, and operated with military precision. Carol was 52 years old, with graying brown hair kept in a practical ponytail and kind eyes that missed nothing. She wore the standard school district uniform, navy blue polo shirt and khaki pants, but carried herself with a posture that suggested she'd worn other uniforms before this one. The children on her route knew Carol as the quiet bus driver who always made sure they got to school safely. She knew every pothole on every street, every traffic pattern, every potential hazard along the 12-mile route. But what the kids didn't know was that Carol's careful driving habits came from 3 tours in Iraq, where a moment of inattention could cost lives. Her route included 35 children from kindergarten through 8th grade, picked up from suburban neighborhoods and rural farms outside Millbrook Elementary and Middle School. Carol knew each child by name, knew which ones struggled with homework, which ones came from difficult home situations, and which ones needed a kind word to start their day right. The kids liked Carol. She was patient with the younger ones who forgot their backpacks, firm but fair with the older ones who got rowdy, and always had a stock of tissues, Band-Aids, and encouraging words for whatever crisis arose during the 20-minute ride to school. What they didn't know was that Carol Washington had once been Staff Sergeant Carol Martinez, 88th Transportation Company, responsible for driving supply convoys through some of the most dangerous roads in Iraq. She had commanded vehicles worth millions of dollars, protected cargo that kept entire bases operational, and brought her soldiers home alive from missions that officially never happened. The Bronze Star Medal hidden in her glove compartment was awarded for valor during a convoy attack in 2006, when her quick thinking and decisive action had saved the lives of her entire squad. But Carol never talked about that day, just like she never talked about the nightmares that still woke her up sometimes, or the way her hands would shake when she heard loud noises. It was a Tuesday morning in October, the kind of crisp fall day when leaves covered the roads in slippery golden carpets. Carol was making her usual pickup rounds when she saw it happen. A delivery truck running a red light at the intersection of Maple and 3rd Street, heading straight for the side of her bus. In that split second, Carol's military training took over. Time slowed down, and she processed the situation with the tactical awareness that had kept her alive through 3 combat deployments. The truck was traveling approximately 45 miles per hour, would impact the bus just behind the front wheel well, and there were 12 children currently aboard ranging in age from 6 to 13. Carol did 3 things simultaneously. She yanked the steering wheel hard to the right to minimize the impact angle. She shouted, "Brace for impact!" in the command voice that had once directed convoy operations under fire, and she activated the emergency brake system to prevent the bus from rolling. The collision was inevitable, but Carol's actions turned a potentially fatal crash into a survivable accident. The truck clipped the front corner of the bus instead of hitting it dead on, spinning the bus 180 degrees and sending it sliding off the road into a shallow ditch. In the moments after impact, as dust settled and children began crying, Carol's combat training fully engaged. She was no longer a school bus driver. She was Staff Sergeant Martinez, conducting post-attack damage assessment and casualty evacuation procedures. "Sound off if you're hurt," Carol commanded, her voice cutting through the confusion with authority that surprised the children into immediate response. One by one, the kids called out their status, and Carol mentally cataloged each voice, each injury report. 2 children had bumped heads and were crying but conscious. One 8th grader had a cut on his forehead from flying debris. 3 kindergartners were terrified but uninjured. The rest were shaken but mobile. Carol's first priority was establishing scene security, a habit from convoy operations, where the first attack was often followed by secondary assaults on rescue personnel. She activated the bus radio and gave a precise situation report to dispatch. Bus 847, intersection of Maple and 3rd, vehicle collision, 12 children aboard, multiple minor injuries, no immediate life threats, requesting medical and law enforcement response. Her second priority was casualty assessment and treatment. Carol moved through the bus with efficiency that came from years of battlefield experience, checking each child for signs of serious injury, applying basic first aid, and providing calm reassurance. "Emily, I need you to hold this tissue against Tommy's forehead, just like this. Good girl. Marcus, can you help me make sure everyone stays in their seats? Perfect." What the children experienced was a calm, competent adult taking charge of a frightening situation. What they were actually witnessing was a decorated combat veteran conducting a textbook emergency response using skills learned in far more dangerous circumstances. As sirens approached and emergency responders arrived on scene, Carol continued coordinating the evacuation with military precision. She had each child sound off by name as they exited the bus, directed them to a safe rally point away from traffic, and provided first responders with detailed casualty reports that impressed the paramedics with their accuracy. "Driver did everything right," one of the EMTs told his partner. "Kids are banged up but no serious injuries. Someone knew what they were doing." Fire Chief Martinez, no relation despite the shared name, approached Carol as she supervised the children's reunification with their parents. "Ma'am, that was some impressive emergency response. You have medical training?" Carol hesitated for a moment. "Some. Previous job?" "Military?" "Army. Transportation Corps." Chief Martinez nodded with new understanding. "Combat deployments?" 3 tours, Iraq. As parents arrived to collect their children, word spread quickly about how the bus driver's quick thinking had prevented a tragedy. But what really caught people's attention was the way Carol had handled the aftermath, the calm authority, the precise medical assessments, the textbook emergency procedures. Mrs. Patterson, whose daughter Emma was on the bus, approached Carol as the scene was being cleared. "The children are saying you were like a different person after the crash. Very military." Carol wasn't sure how to respond. She'd spent 8 years trying to be just a normal school bus driver, but crisis had a way of revealing who you really were underneath. "Mom," Emma interrupted. Miss Carol was amazing. She made everyone feel safe, and she knew exactly what to do. She was like a real soldier. Carol smiled at the girl. "I'm just glad everyone's okay, sweetheart." But Emma wasn't finished. "Miss Carol, can I ask you something?" "Sure, honey." "Were you really a soldier? Like in a war?" Carol looked at the earnest face of the 10-year-old girl who rode her bus every day, who always said good morning and thank you, who had trusted her to keep everyone safe during the scariest moment of her young life. "Yes, Emma, I was a soldier, but now I'm a bus driver, and my job is keeping you and your friends safe on the way to school." "That's the same job, isn't it?" Carol blinked, surprised by the child's insight. "Yeah, honey, I guess it is." That evening, Carol sat in her small apartment, still processing the day's events. The accident had been handled, all the children were safe at home, and the bus would be repaired. But something had shifted during those few minutes after the crash. A part of herself she'd been keeping buried had surfaced. Carol's transition from military to civilian life hadn't been easy. After 3 deployments driving convoy routes through Anbar province, she'd returned home with PTSD, survivor's guilt, and skills that didn't translate to civilian employment. Driving a school bus had seemed like a natural fit. It used her driving abilities, her protective instincts, and her experience managing groups under pressure. But it had also been a way to hide. On the bus, she was just Carol the driver, not Staff Sergeant Martinez, who had survived 5 IED attacks, lost 2 soldiers under her command, and been awarded the Bronze Star for actions she still couldn't talk about without reliving them. The Bronze Star citation, hidden in her glove compartment, told a story she'd never shared with anyone in Millbrook. For exceptionally valorous actions during combat operations on 15 March 2006, when her convoy came under coordinated enemy attack near Ramadi. Staff Sergeant Martinez maintained control of her vehicle while under direct fire, maneuvered to protect disabled vehicles, and conducted casualty evacuation under hostile conditions, directly contributing to the survival of her entire squad. What the citation didn't mention was the weight of command, the split-second decisions that meant life or death for the soldiers depending on her, or the way those experiences had changed her forever. Carol had chosen bus driving because it felt like a peaceful version of her military job, protecting people, getting them safely from point A to point B, taking responsibility for their welfare. But she'd never expected her past to surface so dramatically. Word of Carol's heroic response spread quickly through the small community. By the next morning, the local newspaper had run a story titled, "Bus Driver's Quick Thinking Prevents Tragedy," which mentioned her military background but focused primarily on the accident response. But the children on her bus were the real story spreaders. They went to school talking about how Miss Carol had been like a superhero, how she'd known exactly what to do, how she'd made them feel safe even when they were scared. She was like a different person, 12-year-old Marcus told his parents. Like she'd done this before, but way more dangerous. Parents began researching Carol's background, and slowly details emerged. The local VFW post confirmed that she was a member but rarely attended meetings. The VA hospital recognized her name as a patient who had completed PTSD treatment. A retired Army recruiter remembered processing her discharge paperwork and being impressed by her service record. Principal Johnson at Millbrook Elementary called Carol into a meeting the following week. Carol expected to be questioned about the accident, but instead found herself facing something unexpected: gratitude and curiosity. "Carol, I've been hearing amazing things about how you handled the emergency. The parents are calling you a hero." "I just did what needed to be done." "I think it was more than that. The way you organized the children, the medical assessments, the communication with first responders. That wasn't just good instincts, that was training." Carol shifted uncomfortably. "I may have picked up some things in the Army." "The Army," Principal Johnson repeated. "Carol, in 8 years of employment here, you've never mentioned your military service on any form or in any conversation." "It didn't seem relevant to driving a school bus." "Except it was completely relevant. Your military experience may have saved lives on Tuesday." Principal Johnson leaned forward. "Carol, our school has been looking for someone to coordinate our emergency preparedness program. We need someone who understands crisis management, someone the children trust, someone with real experience. Would you be interested?" Carol considered the principal's offer for several days. Taking on emergency preparedness duties would mean acknowledging her military background, talking about skills she'd acquired in combat, and potentially reliving experiences she'd spent years trying to forget. But it would also mean using her training to protect children, preparing them for situations she hoped they'd never face, and turning her painful experiences into something positive. The decision was made for her during the next week's bus ride. Emma, the 10-year-old who had asked about her military service, approached Carol with a question. "Miss Carol, my mom says you're a hero from the war. Is that true?" Carol paused, considering how to answer. "I was a soldier, Emma. I did my job, just like I do now." "But you saved people in the war, too, didn't you?" "Sometimes." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I think driving our bus is the same as being a soldier. You keep us safe every day." That afternoon, Carol returned to Principal Johnson's office and accepted the Emergency Preparedness Coordinator position. 6 months later, Millbrook Elementary held its first comprehensive emergency drill under Carol's supervision. Students and staff practiced lockdown procedures, evacuation routes, and basic first aid with the kind of thoroughness that impressed visiting district officials. But more importantly, Carol had found a way to honor her military service while building a meaningful civilian career. She still drove Bus 47 every morning and afternoon, but she also trained teachers in crisis response, developed safety protocols, and taught age-appropriate emergency preparedness to students. The Bronze Star remained in her glove compartment, but it was no longer hidden. When children asked about it during Veterans Day presentations, Carol would explain that it represented doing your job when people depended on you, even when you were scared. "The most important thing I learned in the Army," she would tell them, "is that being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what needs to be done anyway, because other people are counting on you." Carol Washington had found a way to serve her community that honored both her military past and her civilian present. She was still the quiet bus driver who made sure children got to school safely. But now everyone understood that her careful attention to safety came from someone who had learned its importance in the most serious circumstances possible. The accident that could have been a tragedy became a story of heroism, training, and the way military service continues long after the uniform comes off. Carol Washington had spent years hiding her combat experience, but one moment of crisis revealed that some skills never fade and some responsibilities never end. The children on Bus 47 still called her Miss Carol, still said good morning and thank you, still trusted her to keep them safe. But now they also knew that their quiet bus driver was someone who had served her country with distinction and continued serving her community with the same dedication. Sometimes heroes wear combat boots. Sometimes they wear bus driver uniforms. Sometimes they're the same person using different tools to accomplish the same mission, protecting the people who depend on them. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not on foreign battlefields, but on suburban streets, protecting the next generation. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never stop serving, who find new ways to use their training to keep others safe. So I ask you, have you ever met someone whose quiet dedication masked a warrior's heart? Someone who served in combat and continues serving in communities? Share their story in the comments. Because here on the Veteran Chronicles, we believe that true service never ends. It just finds new forms. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it. Help us honor the veterans who protect our children every day in ways both seen and unseen.